When it comes to optimizing warehouse operations, automation isn't just the future, it's already here. In this episode, we sit down with Jonathan Camilla from Abel Womack to uncover how forward-thinking companies are transforming their warehouse floors with robotics, AI, and smarter material handling systems. If you're a corporate tenant looking to boost efficiency and cut costs, this conversation is packed with insights you can't afford to miss.
Hi all, Don Catalano back with you today with an exciting guest. We're going to talk about industry trends and warehouse efficiency. Now that might not sound too exciting, but stay with me on this because this man knows about AI, robotics, return on investment. It's going to be very informative, I promise you that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jonathan Camilla of Abel Womack, and they are experts in warehouse efficiency. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Appreciate that, Don. I appreciate you having me here, and I appreciate the time you're taking with me. A little bit about myself. I've been with Abel Womack for 10 years. I've worked in the Suffolk County area. I've been an account manager, national account manager, a team leader, and now core sales manager. A little bit about Abel. We're about 102 years old now as a company. We started out in just material moving. Then we went to overhead cranes, got to forklifts. Now we're on to automation and robotics and AI, and basically anything you could do within the four walls of a warehouse and incorporate technology and material movement.
Tell me about your service area. Is it the United States? Is it global? Tell me where Abel Womack can bring efficiency to customers.
Basically anywhere. If you're talking about designing a warehouse or designing a distribution center, or manufacturing facility, we can do that anywhere in the country, right? And we do that for our national accounts now. We deal with some very household names, and I'm sure if I mentioned them, you would know exactly who they were. And they have a lot of facilities that we work. We work with companies like Staples and CVS and CNS Grocers and Restaurant Depot and other facilities.
Those locations are around the country, correct?
Around the country, in some cases, multinational. We have them in other countries as well. When it comes to a national account like that, we can sell them forklifts if they're in a territory all over the country. We can design their facilities all over the country. Local companies, something that doesn't have a national account, we can't sell them forklifts outside the territory. Everything else we can do. We can sell them automation solutions. We can design their warehouse or distribution center. We can sell them pallet racking and anything else that will go inside the facility.
Okay, so most of what we're going to talk about today, you can sell anywhere in the country or in the globe. And you can design these systems for anyone, any big company, anywhere, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a team of engineers that work on this stuff all day.
Yeah. Excellent. So tell me, how have you seen the demand for warehouse automation evolve over the last few years?
The demand for warehouse automation has increased dramatically over the course of the last few years. It started with COVID, right? COVID caused a massive influx in terms of things coming in, right? People started panic buying, which meant they filled their warehouse, they did more forklifts, they did more racking, and they needed more labor, right? But at the same time, remember the labor shortage, right? Labor shortage in conjunction with needing more labor, exponential increase for automation solutions, right? So we've seen those increase drastically over the course of the last couple of years. And then in conjunction with that, the real trend that we've seen in terms of automation is one trend, and then the other trend is safety. We see that all these safety representatives are around now, and they're involved in the process from day one. So it's two independent trends that we've definitely seen happen over the course of the last couple of years that have had an impact on the business, but in my opinion, have had a very positive impact on the business.
So when you say safety representatives, are you talking about OSHA?
I'm talking about like EH&S, emergency health and safety representatives that are within the companies now.
So within the companies, their own safety representatives, their own safety experts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that actually happened when we started seeing the labor shortages. We started seeing the people that were working, maybe were working two jobs or maybe overworked, or the people that were working maybe weren't the most qualified workers. And we started seeing more incidents take place. And I think companies recognize that when we have these situations within the warehouses or in the manufacturing facilities, it's definitely less expensive to have a safety person that stays on top of everything to deal with injuries or fatalities. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but it's a horrible thing, but it's a very costly thing for a company too.
Companies want to hopefully do the right thing.
Exactly.
So of course they want safety. And we're going to get into the safety of these systems, but I'm glad to hear from the get-go that safety is paramount in your design. And for the companies that are buying these systems, it's on the forefront of the top of their checklist. It's one of the top things. Let's go to my next question. Tell me about swarm bots and robotic palletizing and how that is transforming warehouse operations.
Number one, it increases the efficiency. So a swarm bot is basically a bot that's going to go to a picker that's within an aisle, and it's going to reduce the amount of walking that the person has to do. The actual person is going to have to do less walking. They're going to go from pick to pick to pick, and the bot's going to go from person to pack station, person to pack station, person to pack station. So it reduces the amount of walking, and it increases the amount of picking, which is going to increase the amount of efficiency. And there's a bunch of technologies that are similar to those, and I feel like I see a new one every week, and I feel like I see 10 new ones at the trade shows every time we go to the trade shows. Something like a palletizer, like a robotic palletizing arm, you're not going to find it so much in distribution as you will in manufacturing. That's going to be designed to take like a product that's manufactured and just put it on a pallet. So think of like, we see a lot of success in bags of ice, bags of pellets, bags of flour, whatever it is, when it's a lot of the same item being manufactured, going down a conveyor line at the end of it, instead of having a person lugging this 50-pound bag onto a pallet, we use a robotic arm to put the bag on the pallet. It's reducing the number of injuries that you're going to see. That's the main thing with a robotic arm is it's going to reduce the number of injuries. It's going to never get sick. It's going to never not show up for work. The mean time to repair on those things is about between 10 and 20,000 hours, depending on the brand. It's a very long time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the robots haven't formed a union yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Never know with AI.
I was going to say.
They might get so smart that they might think about that. Okay.
Right. Then they're pulling in sick.
Yeah. Learn from us humans, right?
Right.
Okay. So what are the most significant challenges you see today in warehouse design, especially when it comes to integrating automation?
It's typically the answer is space, right? The challenge is always if we're in a location and we have an idea or the customer has an idea and they say, hey, listen, we have this process and it's a repetitive process. We want to automate it. The first challenge is, okay, you have this other infrastructure that's there and maybe it's a manufacturer, maybe some kind of manufacturing equipment, whatever it is. Can we fit what we have to fit in the area that we have to fit it? But especially at times you're dealing in buildings that are very, here in the Northeast, at least, you're dealing with buildings that are kind of old. Maybe they have not the best layout that's conducive for a warehouse because it was built in the 20s and 30s. So you see stuff like that. It's typically space and then fitting that solution into that area.
But I imagine with the older buildings, even they can benefit from your racking systems and automation, correct?
Definitely. They can absolutely benefit from it without a doubt. It's just a challenge because sometimes they have a lot of things. If you have a manufacturer that's been around for 50 years and he's got all this equipment and it just keeps building onto it, sometimes it's difficult to put a piece of or some kind of automation solution, depending on what it is, into that facility. If you're talking about things that like a swarm bot or like a goods picker solution, then those things they basically use the infrastructure that you have today and they get around. That's like one of the concepts behind a swarm bot is instead of putting in a conveyor that's going to be a permanent solution, you can put in a swarm bot that's going to go back and forth and do a very similar task, but not be a permanent solution.
And I would imagine, like everything in computerization, the price of swarm bots, which probably started very high, has come down precipitously. Am I correct in that?
Of course. Yeah. Everything automation-wise has started very high and come down as it should. As more competition reaches the marketplace, we see the prices come down.
Excellent. And the ROI then goes up.
I was just going to say, typically when they come to market, they're modeling their price structure on an ROI, right? They're saying, okay, we can save you this much money and so it's going to cost you this much money, which is a little bit less.
Right.
Once competition is the marketplace and they say, okay, we can actually manufacture for this and we know we can sell it for this, it starts to drive the price down and down and down and down.
Okay. Very good. And I imagine all your clients, there's an initial investment that's this much, but they are looking at it, well, okay, we invest this much. I can recoup that in a year or 2 or 3. And then every year thereafter, I'm saving money, which is the equivalent of making money. What is the typical, if you can give me a typical payback on some of these systems? In other words, if I invest, I don't know, pick a number, $100,000 or $1 million, whatever it is, what is your client's typical payback? How long does it take them to recoup that initial investment? And then thereafter, it's all gravy.
Yes, it's a conversation I have with clients all the time. And if it was over 18 months, I wouldn't sell it to you. Right? Very straightforward. If it was over 18 months, I wouldn't sell you I wouldn't sell you a solution at all. Typically, I want it to be very expensive, right? I want a big number because, right, if we have a 12-month ROI and something that costs a couple $1 million, that means you save a couple $1 million every 12 months thereafter.
Right.
And a lot of times with financing options, you don't have to wait the 12 months. You lease it or you finance it and you're cash positive literally day one once you sign off on that.
If they script the check for the CapEx investment and there can be tax benefits to that, with the current administration, they're going to roll out or try to keep what we already have, but they might reset the 100% depreciation. And that would be a tremendous boon for both your company and companies like you, but also for your clients. So let's say they invest $5 million in a system that has an ROI where they're paying for that system in 18 months. But on top of that, if the current administration, the Trump administration, has its way with taxes, we might go back to 100% depreciation on that CapEx. Am I correct?
Yes. Absolutely. And that has immense benefits. And we have customers who are holding off on projects until they get a little bit of certainty on what's going to happen with that. It's something that we go through every few years when they change policies, but we're dealing with it right now.
That could change very well. I think there's a lot of pressure on the Trump administration to do some positive things after rolling out these tariffs. So I would imagine that within this year, we're going to get back to 100% depreciation, which would be fantastic for your clients and, of course, help them optimize their solutions. How do you foresee warehouse operations changing in the next 5 to 10 years, especially considering we have onshoring now coming? It looks like a lot of supply chains, the net effect of this tariff war is when the dust settles, there's no doubt that there's going to be a lot more onshoring. How much, we don't know. But supply chains are going to move around. A lot of them aren't going to be China-centric. I think COVID started that, and the world learned a valuable and painful lesson that if there's one country that's the manufacturer for the rest of the world, and there's something like a pandemic, that can be extremely disruptive. My analysis, I'm positive of this, is supply chains are going to move away. I'm not saying you won't have China manufacturing, but there's going to be a great diversity in manufacturing and generally in supply chains. Going with that in mind, how do you foresee warehouse operations changing here? Let's start with CONUS, with the United States.
I think we're going to see over the course of the next 3 to 5, or however we want to term it, I think we're going to see a lot more automation solutions, right? Because that's just where it's going now. We've already, that ship is already sailing and it's not slowing down. Despite supply chains being within the country and not disrupted, and we don't have labor shortages, it's still happening. There's too much momentum. And we're also going to start seeing AI. AI is going to start getting incorporated because we're already starting to see it now. It's going to get a lot more incorporated into the intelligence behind the stuff we do in our industry. Supply chain moving into this country, I'm not positive it's going to have a huge impact on the movement, because I just feel like instead of importing it from somewhere, we're going to be making it here and still moving it the same way, right? So within the country, we're still going to have the same amount of movement and the same amount of storage, and maybe even a little bit less storage. I mean, if we're getting it from here, it's within our country, and we're not panic buying in certain situations, then we could also get it in maybe a week instead of 4, 5, 7 weeks on the water, whatever it's taken. I think we might even see like a little bit of decrease in storage space, which is a huge positive for everyone. You don't need to store that much inventory on hand because you're afraid or because you think you're not going to be able to get it. So I'm not sure how much the impact of the onshoring is going to have. I think it's going to have a hugely positive impact on our economy, obviously, but I'm not positive that we're going to see a huge impact on movement within the material handling world.
Okay. Next question. When tenants are considering new warehouse distribution space, what are some of the key factors that should guide their decision-making process when it comes to racking and storage solutions? And let me just add automation.
What do you need today when you're moving into a space? What do you need a year from now? What's your 5-year plan, right? And no matter what, we don't want to have to change. Yeah, 5-year plan, absolutely. We don't want to have to change things over the course of time. Like, I don't want to have to move racking. I don't want to have to unload everything and move stuff over. I don't want to have to sell forklifts and buy new ones. I really don't want to disrupt the operations. Besides the 1 year, 5-year plans, we should have a number of pallet goal, right? We should know what types of forklifts we're looking at. Before we move in there, we should know the thickness of the floor, right? Can we even do this stuff? Do we need an engineer to go in there and do the assessment in terms of how high can the racking be? How much weight can we hold? Do we need stamped drawings? Do we need calcs for this? There's a ton of things to go into it, but everything when it comes to designing racking or designing a new space, which is basically designing racking or automation solutions, is going to come down to looking at the data, right? What do you have on hand today? How much of that do you have? How fast does it move? How much does it weigh? How big is it? Is it cases that we're picking? Is it pieces that we're picking? Is it pallets that we're picking? Once we determine all that stuff, we can figure out what storage medium is the best for you based on what you have on hand. From there, we figure out what forklift we could use. We determine the size of the aisles, basically, and then we design the facility. And we just
aisle width.
Yeah, exactly. Aisle width. And then those are the main things you have to think about when you're designing a facility. It's just, you want to pretend you're living there already, and you want to pretend you're 5 years there. And then you also want to have a roadmap. Even if you're your 5-year plan, you don't need that in year one. You want to make sure you're growing into that, right? And not moving stuff. I've had 100 situations where I've designed warehouses, right? And I've said, okay, you're running these sit-down forklifts over here. We're going to move you into this warehouse in 5 years or 3 years. We're going to make it a very narrow aisle application. But in the meantime, we're just going to install every other aisle. You're going to run the same forklifts you have now. And then in the future, we're just going to come in and lay the racking in the middle, put in the wire guidance, and you just doubled your pallet locations. In the beginning, when you moved, we didn't have to spend money on equipment. It makes it a lot easier for people. So there's a lot to think about. The main thing I would say, the most important thing when you're considering a space is call someone like us.
Well, that makes sense.
We're going to think about everything, and we're going to make sure that when you move in there, it's turnkey and you don't have any problems with the town or with the material storing or the racking or the equipment. this is my passion, obviously, right? I mean, you see the stuff in the background. I love the forklifts, I love the racking, I love the automation, I love designing.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. So, and like, I pride myself on making sure that you're going to have a turnkey solution. There's not going to be an issue. And
You're thinking not just today's just the beginning. You're thinking 5 years, but I bet you're even thinking 10 and maybe even 15 years, and helping that customer plan for that now versus face a real bad situation, maybe 3 to 5 years. Business is booming, but they didn't acquire the right space, the right warehouse. Their existing warehouse wasn't properly planned out, and it just costs more later, and it affects their EBITDA.
your point, that I've designed warehouses, with a plan in mind where we can raise the roof 5 years from now, right? And then double or maybe increase by 40% the number of pallet locations. I mean, like automation solutions that will work in the infrastructure that we have today, but are not available to the public. And I've designed facilities for that in mind, that when they're available, because we're testing them, we see them at shows, and they have beta
When they
sites.
become available.
And all of a sudden you have an automated forklift.
A lot of what you're talking about is in the book that we just are publishing called Space That Works. And we talk about, you got to get in front of this. You have to know what to look for. And it's a lot more complex than most people realize, because we do both office and warehouse space. And I can tell you, warehouse space is actually, there's a lot more to it. People don't realize that than there is to office space. For instance, you mentioned before the density of the flooring. If there's not enough rebarbed concrete, and there's different systems for rebarbing your concrete, it can't support the load, which is in thousands of pounds per square inch, depending on how vertical you go, the weight of what you have to palletize. Also, geographically, where are you? If you're in California near a fault, you got to up the ante just a bit. Just talking about some of the things that we bring out in our books, Space That Works. There's just one tagline that we like to say: warehouse space is relatively boring compared to selling coffins, right? We can say that and laugh about it, right? Until you get it wrong. All of a sudden, it gets real exciting, especially if it was your job to pick the right warehouse. To your point, you got to think about these things well in advance, or as we like to say when I was in the Army, the 5 Ps. Prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And so engaging someone like you and your company, at the very least, to do a study, which will probably evolve into execution, but to understand what you have, the density of the concrete that is in your current warehouse, or perhaps you're looking for new warehouse space. What should you be looking for? Ceiling height. Many people aware that it's not just the ceiling height. What's the flooring like? And is it level? So engaging a company like you, that's going to pay great dividends, in my opinion.
Thank you. I absolutely agree with you. And you just nailed it with the flatness of the floor. I mean, there's certain equipment that you have to have a certain level of flatness. Like
Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
So what is it for like 100 feet or 200 feet? What is it? 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters?
It depends on the height of the truck. And they have like an FMIN standard, right? So it's FMIN 50, FMIN 60, and FMIN 80, depending on the height of our trucks. And I'm pretty sure what that means is over 50 feet, you have to be off by less than 1 centimeter, right? So for 50, same thing. 60 is 1 centimeter over 60 feet, and 80 feet. Yeah. They're considered super flat floors. It's something you have to design when you're, we work with a lot of builders that design warehouses. We do a lot of buildings that we're designing warehouses. And it's something we always have to make sure that's in the spec phase, is that we need FMIN 80 floors if we're doing a 40-foot clear building, or FMIN 70 floors if we're doing a 40-foot clear building, right? To make sure that there's no sway at height and things like that when you're picking up a 2,500 pound pallet that's 36 feet in the air.
You don't want sway.
You don't want sway. You don't want to hit the aisle.
It's exciting. And you don't want that kind of excitement. Right?
That's one screw up. That's what I don't. That's the one I don't want. That's the excitement I definitely don't want.
That's why they have to call you in advance. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk about data. Data is in everything that we do now. AI is, of course, taking data and making it more useful. What kind of data do you need from your clients to be their coach, to be their engineer and consultant? What kind of data do they need to prepare? What do they need to think about?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is velocity report, right? Velocity report is going to show us, what you're selling and how fast it's moving over a course of whatever period of time, right? And then from there, we have to get granular, and we have to know, are you moving it just in pallets, or are you moving it in pieces, or are you moving it in cases?
Okay.
Right? Once we know that, we have to know, are the cases this size, or the pieces this? We get really deep and we figure out what exactly you're storing, how exactly, how fast it's moving. And then that's really going to drive 90% of the solution. Other than that, we're going to look at weights, we're going to look at the clear heights and things like that. But the real data that we need is just how fast it's moving and how it's moving, whether it's cases, pieces, or eaches. And then from there, we could come up with a good solution. Are we picking from floor level in our golden zone, which is up to 6 or so feet? Are we doing an order picker because we have to go all the way up and we're just picking cases from everywhere? We just have to get a really good idea of what you're doing and what you have on hand, what you're doing today. And then we have to figure out if we can optimize it, do it a little bit better. We'll redesign it if we are redesigning it. And even if we're not redesigning something like this, it's a lot of times we're involving like lean management. So we can have someone come in and take a look at what they're doing, take a look at their data and say, okay, why would you put this all the way back here if it's moving this fast? Right. And then we start redesigning things. We just start tightening up the efficiencies. We have a whole team of people that'll go in and literally follow people around and say, okay, we should move this to here. We'll have spaghetti diagrams that show you where they go throughout the course of their picks and how long they take and how many picks they do per hour and things like that to try to get them to be more efficient.
Efficiency.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So you alluded to one mistake that customers can make. Tell me the top 2 or 3 mistakes that businesses make when setting up their warehouse operations or optimizing them or not optimizing. That's a mistake right there. Tell me the top 2 or 3 mistakes. You mentioned like the picking. Where is it? Right. And how often are you picking that and who's doing it?
A lot of times we'll see that they're not going to utilize the vertical height, right? They're not going to think about, maybe I'm going to take the racking from the old building, move into the new building. You don't realize that the new building, you could fit more and we're not utilizing all the height. A lot of times people aren't thinking about building columns. They'll have someone internally just design the racking and say, okay, I use 9-foot aisles. Here it is. It's in Excel. Here's what we're going to do. And they don't think that you can't have a building column in an aisle because it's going to get hit by a forklift, or a forklift's going to hit it. And the building column is generally going to win. It's going to damage the crap out of the forklift. You're going to have a really bad day. So I think it's just basic design stuff. And then I got to tell you, Don, the thing that I see probably the most is that people move into a place and they're immediately out of space. Like, all right, I'm here. I don't know what to do. Or they're in there for a year and they're out of space. They don't do that. What do I need today? What do I need a year from now? Well, what's my 5-year plan? I think that's the most important thing is having that room for growth within the warehouse, because it's incredibly disruptive to have to move again. And it's also expensive to have to move again.
Well, yeah. And then there's the fact that you've signed a lease for 5, 10, 15 years. So,
right.
Or you've purchased the building. So you want to get it right the first time. That's a combination of using experts like you, but also picking a very good tenant rep, a broker who's not trying to represent the landlords and has a conflict of interest, who's got, just like you, who's got the client's interest at heart, and asking the tough questions. Is this space big enough for you, not just today, but in 5 and 10 years? What are your plans? What are your strategic plans? And to bring in experts like you, like good tenant reps. You mentioned it. You can't just pick up and say, okay, this building, we're out of here in 2 years. Well, no, you signed a 10-year lease. Maybe you're going to get a supplemental building or another location, but it'd been more cost efficient to do it right the first time.
Absolutely. It's significantly less expensive to get it right the first time than it is to use a third-party logistics company or take on additional space. I work with now, they come to me immediately when they get a new listing and they say, hey, Jonathan, do me a favor. I just got this new listing. Tell me what it would look like with a reach truck, with a very narrow aisle solution with a sit down. This way I could tell my tenants, if they're moving into this building, they could expect to get anywhere between 3,000 and 7,000 pallet locations, depending on what type of truck they run. Immediately provide value. They immediately have a step up over, other people that aren't doing this. And they can say, listen, I know this is the right space for you because you, Mr. Customer, told me you need 1,500 pallet locations. That's what we have now. And we could grow to 7,000, which is what you need in 5 years. It's a takeaway, right? Where we couldn't possibly get it wrong because you told me what you needed.
One better than that, though. You're talking about landlord reps. They have a fiduciary to promote that building and get the highest price. Their fiduciary is not to the corporate tenant, the space user. And that's a common misnomer. And there's a lot of brokers that try to straddle the fence, and it's a true conflict of interest. So they're much better off with a pure tenant rep. I'm sure the landlord reps that come to you want to know how to best exploit their building so they can explain it to prospects. And that's well and good, and a good thing that they do. However, that doesn't mean that their particular building, the one that they have an exclusive to represent, is the best solution. And that's why they want an independent tenant rep who will take them from site to site and has nothing to gain by any particular site. They want the best site for the client. With that, I want to ask you the next question.
Sure.
Tell me about your expertise in goods to picker solutions.
Goods to picker solutions, there's so many of them now, right? And basically, as opposed to a guy or an operator going through a warehouse and picking goods and It's more of a vertical lift module where you're staying in a machine and now the goods are literally coming to you on a tray. Or we have something like a shelving unit that's on a AMR, which is an autonomous mobile robot, and the whole shelving unit is coming to you and you're standing in a pick station. So as opposed to picking through shelving, the shelving comes to you. There's probably 10, 12, 15 companies that we work with. And the whole idea with the goods to picker solution is we want to be able to maximize the vertical space that you wind up using in some cases, like with a vertical lift module. We want to be able to pick much more efficiently than you normally would. It increases the level of picking probably 100 to 200%, depending on the solution.
Right. They're using a tablet or some kind of interface, a keyboard, and they're saying, I need XYZ product or products. And that picker solution is going to move where it needs to go pick it and bring it down to that.
Correct.
Okay.
And a lot of times they're operating maybe more than one vertical lift module. So as they say, let me call this one, the one next to them is already ready. So they go pick that one, call that one. By the time they come to this one, this good is already there. So they're literally just walking back and forth and, picking what they have to pick. So it's incredibly, incredibly efficient.
And safer.
Absolutely. Because you're not
Someone doesn't have to go or even use the forklift. The items are going to come down to them on the ground level. It's more efficient. It's safer. You said 100 times more efficient, and I can believe that. So the ROI on that's going to be through the roof.
It's ROI, or it's, doing a lot more with the same amount of people, right? Like think about how much more you can do if your people are more efficient. They're going from picking 100 pieces an hour to 200 pieces an hour, right? You could do twice as much with the same people, or you could do as much as you're doing today with half the number of people and then repurpose them, move them around. They have to go within the company.
It's a less laborious job for the person. They're now working hand in glove with the automation and saying, I need these things, and it's being brought to them, and then they can move it to the next step. All right. With that in mind, let's talk about automation and future-proofing your warehouse designs. The question I'm going to give you is, you specialize in advanced technologies like vertical lift modules. Matter of fact, I was watching your YouTube channel and I saw one client praising your solutions, and he had a refrigerated vertical lift module that integrates, of course, picking too. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Tell us about the vertical lift modules and robotic palletizing.
It's a good use of a picker solution, right? Vertical lift module is what we're describing, where we have basically a box with trays inside. The trays are going to bring the items to the picker, right? The picker is going to be able to pick what they need to do, pick what they need to pick, and do it pretty accurately. I mean, they have things like pick to light, where we'll shine a light on the tray that they need to actually pick, so they kind of can't mess it up. Again, you can operate in a pod of these things, maybe anywhere between 2 and 4 of them, and then all of a sudden you're picking very, very quickly. We get pick rates in the area of 250 to 300 pieces an hour, which is very, it's up there in terms of being able to be efficient and getting goods out the door. So it's a lot faster than you would be able to do with other types of automation. It's also secure, right? Another benefit of the VLMs is they're secure, right? We only have certain people that are able to access them. So a lot of times what we'll see in like a third-party logistics environment, or sometimes in a manufacturer, if they have a high-end good, right? For example, they'll keep this in the vertical lift module because they know it's safe and they know they have access control. They know who's going in it, when they're going in it, and what they're doing. Right? A lot of people actually use it for security. So you see things like watches and jewelry and perfumes and things like that going into VLMs because they're high-end, small items that could, walk out of a warehouse pretty quickly. It's efficiency. It's safety, right? We're not moving as much as we would in a warehouse. And then it's, security.
When you mentioned security right away, in my mind, I was thinking of pharmaceuticals.
Absolutely. They have them too. Yeah.
You'll
see them in pharmaceuticals in certain areas. Typically, they're very expensive vials or drugs or whatever it is. And then in other pharmaceuticals, you'll just see giant vaults. Depending on what they're selling, they have to have a big vault, and it doesn't matter what's inside it. They don't need a VLM. It just has to be a big vault. But the idea behind the VLM, if we are putting it in a vault, is that it's very dense. And you could fit probably, I don't want to put a number on it, but you could put a lot more in a lot smaller of a footprint because you just don't have aisles.
So how do these systems integrate with traditional racking setups to optimize the warehouse? Can you do that? Can you take a vertical system and integrate them with what a customer already has, or maybe another racking system that you'll help them implement?
We'll see it a lot of times in manufacturing because we'll see shelving and little pick areas and things like that. And a lot of times people in manufacturing there's a lot of value in being able to reclaim floor space. So we'll see them take a VLM and install it instead of shelving. It goes, right in conjunction with the racking they have and the shelving they have, or shelving they still have. And they'll reclaim that area in manufacturing. Other times you'll see it, like I said, in secure goods, they'll want to see that there. And in terms of reclaiming vertical space, right, and density, we can do that too in terms of in the warehouse if the product mix is right. We want to have the stuff that's not moving the fastest it possibly can, not moving slow, needs to be secure. That stuff can stay in the VLMs. If we talk about other goods to picker solutions and not just VLMs, there's a lot of ways they incorporate. We have AMRs, like I was mentioning before, AMRs to pick up shelves, to bring shelves to pickers, or to pick stations. AMR is an autonomous mobile robot. It can be a number of things. It's basically used for pallet or piece or shelf transport, any kind of transports.
So it could be one of those automated shuttles? Or is that different?
When you say automated shuttle, what do you mean?
Shuttle that moves the pallet to the back of the rack.
So that would be like an automated storage and retrieval system. So that's a little bit different. An AMR, we're talking, is only going to be on ground level, and it's going to pick up. It's like a Roomba vacuum, right? Where you just imagine a Roomba that you could pick something up with it, and whether it's a pallet or whether it's a case or whether it's a shelf. So it's going to pick up that shelf or case or pallet, and it's going to bring it to the person or bring it to the pick area. And this can be incorporated, into existing facilities now. You put the shelves underneath the racking, and you can do that. So there's a lot of good sticker solutions. There's a lot of stuff we could do in terms of making it more efficient in the warehouse and incorporating the stuff that already exists. It's just how you want to do it. The only way to really figure out what we want to do is to get the data and go from there. Because the data will just tell us, do we need automation, right? Maybe we don't have the ROI there. Maybe we're not running 2 shifts and we don't have the throughput that's going to make it justified. Do we need the automation, or are we better off just optimizing, making our operation more lean and sending in like a lean management team and just saying, okay, let's do things a little bit more efficiently and a little bit better. We'll save you a lot of money, but you don't need automation because the throughput's not there. And it's going to take 3 years to pay for itself. And maybe there'll be something better by then. We don't know.
So Jonathan, can your company work both then as a fee-based consultant and not sell them the equipment, or then maybe you do the consulting, but maybe that gets rolled into the price or maybe even negated if they buy the equipment?
Yeah, we do that all the time.
Tell us about your modus of operandi.
So if you want us to just do consulting services, right, we can come in and we'll do what's called like a random lean management service. That's for just walking around the warehouse, walking around the manufacturing facility. We have a team of people that'll spend 3, 4, 5 days there, whatever it takes. Like I was explaining before, they'll do time studies. They'll see how long it takes to do certain processes.
Guys with the stopwatches.
Yeah, sometimes a stopwatch, a lot of times the cameras. Now we get spaghetti diagrams where you actually see the guy moving on a computer over here. He goes back over here. You wonder why he talks to his friend up there for 5 minutes, comes back down, goes to the packing area, and we can identify all that stuff.
You're just setting up cameras and using AI, I would imagine, to track the movement of people and product, correct?
AI and some other rolling up your sleeve work. But yeah, I mean, there's cameras that are set up, definitely. And then there's people there literally with watches.
What are the biggest challenges businesses face when deciding whether or not to invest in automation?
There's so much out there.
I think they get overwhelmed by all the choices.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of people that kind of stay in their lane too, where they just have one solution and they think only vertical lift module, right? And I don't think that's the best solution when it comes to what we're dealing with today, which is a lot of different companies having a lot of different solutions, which are really intelligent ways to do stuff. Being overwhelmed is definitely the biggest challenge. Having the knowledge to know what's happening out there is the biggest challenge. Knowing what exists and what is possible is even tough. And I think that's why companies like what we do is successful, because we're a systems integrator. My job as a company is to know what exists, know how to integrate it into a solution, know how to bring several different solutions into one. Whether you have a conveyor and a VLM and a robotic pallet, those are all different companies, right? Those are all different manufacturers. And the idea is to bring those all into one with a solution that works. And the one thing about us is everything that we sell, we service. At our roots, we're a service organization. So number one, we know everything about the product that we install, right? So we know up and down, we know how to take it apart, we know how to put it together, we know what the problems are. We're very prepared to work on it. Number two, you don't have to worry about like, all right, I got to fly this guy in from Nebraska or something, because that's where the manufacturer is. No, everything that we sell, we work on and we service. Systems integrators can have a huge advantage over any single manufacturer in terms of being able to put a lot of solutions together and then keep them up and running and not have you be down for 3 days or something when you go down.
So how do you help companies evaluate the ROI of automated solutions when comparing it to traditional material handling systems?
It's similar, right? I mean, the main way we're going to do it is with burden rate, right? We know how much labor it takes to do the job now, right? And we know how many people you're using to do whatever the job is now. We base that again on the data, right? We could say, we know you're picking this many pieces an hour because you have this many pickers, you pick this many pieces a day, and so on and so forth. We could break it down, and then we could say, with this solution, we're going to be able to increase that by this percentage because of this. Show you how. We'll show you the simulations, right? And this way you can actually see the ROI. You could see what it's going to look like a lot of times in your facility, exactly what it's going to do on the conveyor, whatever it's going to wind up doing.
You give them a report then, I would assume, a comprehensive analysis.
When we're doing an automation solution, we're going to give you a comprehensive ROI that's going to show you the burden rate you gave us, and then we're going to be able to put it into our ROI calculator and show you exactly how much money you're going to wind up saving and how long it's going to take you to recoup the investment.
Next point, how do you ensure that products you integrate meet all the safety standards for warehouse operations? We started the conversation talking about that, so I want to come back to that point. How do you ensure that?
That's a good question. I mean, we go through, there's a huge checklist of items that a company has to go through in order to do business with us, whether it's insurance or whether it's, you have presence here, or whether we have parts availability where we know if the guy's something, we need to order something, it's going to be overnight. It's going to be available in the United States. It's going to be in stock. Do you work with other Raymond dealers now? There's 23 of us around the country. That's probably one of our strongest attributes is our dealer network.
Yeah, explain that.
Well, I could call the guy in Colorado right now who runs the dealership and say, hey, do you do business with Geek Plus, for example? And he'll tell me whether or not he does. Or I could call the guy in California, Luis. Do you guys do business?
You have a comprehensive network.
Absolutely.
And so the tentacles spread out around the country, and I would assume globally.
Absolutely. All of us talk on a biweekly basis, right? We're on a leadership call for everybody around the country, right? Anybody who's in sales leadership. We see each other, a few times a year, and we're all on a friendly basis because we all help each other. We have an understanding that sometimes I'm going to need to ship something into your territory. You're going to need to ship something into my territory. Right. I'm going to have a problem over there. You're going to have a problem over here.
And that product, that system has to be serviced, as you alluded to before. So exactly. You need to know that you have someone on the ground in that territory that can, when something needs servicing, they could go in and service it. Very good.
If you ask me about our core business, which is forklifts, we track things like mean time to repair and first call completion rate. So if you ask me what those stats are, it basically means that if you call me, my mean time to repair is 4 hours. My first call completion rate is over 90%. Wow. That means within 4 hours, 90% of the time, the technician shows up with the parts on his van to fix your equipment on the spot, right? So it's a very different level of service than what most other people do. And we try to take that and use the same concept when it comes to any other piece of equipment that we service, because we understand that uptime is the most important thing. Yes, my equipment costs money, but it costs you a lot more money when your equipment is down, right? And being able to service that and get it
production stops, right? Jack Welch, when he was alive and in charge of GE, and when they were thriving, I'm not saying they're not thriving now, no one call me and complain. When he was in charge, I spoke to someone that worked for GE at the time, and he told me an interesting fact that if your manufacturing line shut down, you had 4 hours to get on one of their company planes. They'd send a plane for you and to fly to where Jack Welch was and to go on the carpet and explain why. 4 hours. He knew the cost of a system breaking down. It's not the minor cost of hiring a good representative, a good service company, which is the cost of doing business to get there in 4 hours. That's the cost of doing business. The cost is everything is now shut down. You can't distribute your product. It's, very bad monetary cost. So interesting thing about Jack Welch in 4 hours.
That's pretty good hours.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, I've had customers put out, $800,000 an hour, $1 million an hour is what we lose when our equipment is down. Right? That's
believe it. Sure.
I'm a couple $100 to show up.
Yeah. Talk about ROI, right? Or reverse ROI.
Exactly.
Now, let's get into something that's very topical. We have the tariff war, right? Yeah. How does that affect supply chains and even your ability to get equipment like forklifts, conveyors, racking systems, automation systems? Let's say from now to the next 3 to 6 months. How do you foresee that?
Supply chain wise, it's going to be a little bit difficult, right? I mean, a lot of our chips and a lot of things come from overseas, and the ports are kind of slow right now, right?
They are slowing down,
right? They have slowed down significantly over the course of the last however long it's been, a couple of weeks. And when the ports slow down, that means the trucks slow down, and the trucks slow down. That means the warehouses aren't unloading as much, and there's not that much movement within them. And generally things are slowing down. It's going to cause a disruption in the supply chain is what I think. I don't think it's going to be as bad as what we were experiencing during COVID, but I do think we're going to see a disruption in the supply chain.
If someone was thinking about automating their warehouse, might it be a prudent thing for them to get in touch with you now versus 30 days or 60 days, 90 days from now?
I don't think it ever hurts to have a plan in place, right? No matter what happens, I don't think it hurts to have a plan in place and to say, okay, when I do automate, number one, am I ready to automate? Do I need to optimize first? Right? Do I need to take a real good look at what I'm doing and make it a little bit leaner? And then number two, I don't think it hurts to have a plan in place and say, okay, when I'm ready to automate, here's what we can do. Here's a good, intelligent person that knows what they're doing. They have the horsepower behind them in terms of engineers. They have a bunch of different vendors that they work with, and we could really come up with a solution that makes sense, has an ROI behind it, more than likely make you a lot of money going forward and be very successful with. So yeah, as a sales manager, I always think it makes sense to get in touch with us. But the honest from the hard answer is, it doesn't hurt to be prepared as a business owner, because there are things that you're going to need to implement at some point. It's just the way it's going to go. If you're not going to automate within the next 5 to 10 years, you're not going to exist after the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow. There's a poll quote. That's, I believe, true and really quite poignant. Yeah. Wow.
Maybe it'll take a little longer, but it's the way it's going.
I concur. I always believe that everything's always in a state of flux, but sometimes it goes faster. COVID brought about a lot of changes, the work from home movement, just tremendous changes. And of course, AI, some have compared that to the invention of fire, and certainly maybe even more important, ironically, than the internet, but you couldn't have AI without the internet. But It's so transformative. We're progressing as a world and as a society. And then also there's that big jump in efficiency because of something that happened. Or maybe it's COVID brought us down for a bit. But it also, the positive was it made businesses reevaluate the way they do business. So getting ahead of these things, and you either, in my opinion, quickly adopt change, or you get run over by it like a steamroller running your business over. So things are always in a state of flux. You always have to be learning, always have to be looking at not just today, but what's coming next 6 months, next year, next 3 years, so forth. So what strategies do you recommend for businesses then to stay flexible in their warehouse operations when faced with supply chain unpredictability?
It's a good question. I mean, there's a lot to it. In terms of staying flexible, I mean, the main thing is just have your equipment up and running all the time. Have your equipment in good working condition. So this way, if something does happen, if you can't get that part, if there's a back ordered, whatever it is, you don't have to go through that because your equipment was properly maintained and you went through your scheduled maintenance and you did what you have to do. I mean, there's a lot of value in staying ahead of repairs. And I think that's probably the best thing that people can do is whether it's your VLMs, your automation equipment, your forklifts, whatever it is, maintain that equipment. So this way, when it does hit the fan, you're already in a better spot.
Absolutely. As a core sales manager with Abel Womack, how do you differentiate your company from other service providers in the marketplace?
In terms of us, we just do so much, right? I mean, most other companies that are in the space that I do either don't do the forklifts or don't do all the automation solutions or don't do the racking. We have this mindset that we want to have so much game that everybody wants to partner with us, right? And this way we can do everything within the four walls of your warehouse and we really don't have to go anywhere else. And one of the things that I've done and I made a point to do over the course of my career is build a network of people that I trust, build a network of people that I work with. This way I can provide value outside of even a ton of stuff that I could do. I provide value outside of that. And so I have people coming to me saying, Jonathan, I need a floor contractor. Jonathan, I need a paint guy. I need a guy to do my dock doors. I need a guy to do my lights. Whatever it is, they pretty much call us first. So we want to be that central point of contact and be able to have most of the solutions that they're looking for, right? That's the first way. The second way is really, like I was mentioning before, is on the service end of the business. Is like, we really recognize that we're a service organization. We've been around for over 100 years. It's a real fact. And obviously, we didn't have forklifts all the time. We didn't have automation all the time. We didn't have all that stuff, but we always had a level of service that we were able to perform. So if we can say, okay, you're going to call me in the morning and say, hey, my forklift's broken and I'm going to be there in the afternoon. 90% of the time, I got the parts on the van to fix that forklift on the spot.
4 hours. Yeah.
That makes me different than everybody else.
Okay.
Nobody else is even
That's a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going back to what we're talking about, what's the cost of that company now not being able to operate or not being able to operate that forklift? There's a much higher cost than the cost of you get to service it. Okay.
Especially when we say forklift, and people generally think forklift and they'll sit down forklift. But when I say forklift, it could mean very narrow aisle forklift. That's 120 grand, and it's a big structure, and it's the only thing that could fit in that aisle. And if it dies in the aisle, you're kind of dead in the water. So sometimes it's a big deal, right? And sometimes it's the only thing that could get to the pallet that's 35 feet in the air because it's the only truck that's that tall. So all of a sudden, when forklifts go down, it's a big deal and it's costly. We like to pride ourselves in making sure that when that does happen, because it does, they're forklifts, they're all the same. We pick stuff up, we put it on shelves, put it down, and they break. When it does happen, we'll be there fast to fix it.
Talk about narrow aisles. What are the most common aisle widths that you see? I know there's a variable to that.
Yeah.
If you could just explain the top 3 aisle widths.
3 is a really good number, right? The top 3 is a really good number because generally what we're going to do is we're going to design stuff for a sit down, right? Like if you want to just use a sit down counterbalance truck or a stand up counterbalance truck, that's going to require the widest aisle.
But tell the audience, how wide is wide?
Yeah, about right, depending on the truck, 11 to 13 feet, right? Depending on if it's a stand up, you're about 11, a stand up counterbalance truck, and a big sit down would be about 13. Big 4-wheel sit down truck, big heavy duty truck would be about 13 feet. Okay. If you're running a reach truck is going to operate on a 9-foot aisle. Right?
Okay.
This is what you see in typically in grocery and in applications where they have to move very, very, very fast. It can go very tall. It can operate in a relatively small aisle. We call it a narrow aisle truck. And the idea of beyond the very, very fast is 2 of them can pass in the aisle at the same time, right? Which you need if you have a high throughput application. So we got 11 to 13, we got 9 foot, and then the third one would be 6-foot aisle. 6-foot aisle, we're going to consider very narrow aisle. This would be for like a guided turret truck. It goes on the aisle. Once it's in the aisle, if you only go forward and back, unless you hit a button, you can't steer the truck back and forth, so you can't hit the racking. It's a man-up truck. So even though you're in a 6-foot aisle, when the truck lifts, you're lifting up at the truck. So when you're engaging pallets, you're literally looking at the pallet right there as you're engaging the pallet. So it's a very efficient truck in terms of the pallets per hour. And it's the narrowest aisle truck that you're going to find, which is,
the vertical component of it affect that as to aisle width. So in other words, if I have a 30-foot under steel versus a 40-foot under steel, explain to the audience Would that change how you would propose to, assuming a clean slate, the aisle widths?
Definitely. This is what you want to do when you design a facility or with a tow truck or a very narrow aisle truck. You want to have anywhere between 5 and 9 inches of clear space on either side of the truck for sway at height. And that 5 to 9 goes to 6, right? Basically what happens is the aisle has to get a little bit wider as the truck gets a little bit taller because you want to account for some sort of sway at height. Because when you do with a ballot, it is going to sway a little bit as you pick up the ballot, right? And that goes into what we're talking about before also with the super flat floors, right? Because imagine the floor is already putting you like this, and you go to pick up a pallet, you hit the rack.
Ooh, no good.
Not a good situation, and especially not when you're 30 feet in the air.
Ouch. Yes. Yeah. And that's where I want to go with this. The higher, you got to go wider.
Yeah, but we're talking like between 66 and 74 inches, right? Lower end 66, higher end 74. So we're all right around 6 feet. It's not a huge difference, but you're 100%
There's
right.
a difference, right?
Yeah.
It has to be planned for. That's the point I wanted to make.
Oh, absolutely. No, if you told me you want to design a facility and you're going to, you want to make a very narrow aisle, the first question is what's the height? And then we have to figure out the pallet profiles. And from there, then we can figure out the aisle width because we need to know what sway we need.
Okay. Very good. What are the common misconceptions about warehouse automation that you encounter?
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. I mean, in terms of pricing, a lot of people think things are very, very expensive, right? The automation is going to be $1 million. A lot of times it's not. I mean, you can get a cobot for 75 grand, right? So it's not super expensive. It's not super complicated. A lot of times people think you need somebody on site to be able to service the stuff and you have to program it. You talk about like our automated guided vehicles, the AGVs, that's something you could program in, half an hour and you don't need, any kind of training or anything like that. It's just something that's very easy to do. People think it's very complicated, very expensive, and it's not necessarily very complicated or expensive, right? Unless you're doing something very specialized. The other part of it, I think, is people think basically you can do anything. I'm going to say that you could probably do almost anything when it comes to automation, but that's when it does get very, very expensive because you have to have a very specialized piece of equipment to do the same thing that like human fingers can do, for example.
Okay.
Right? These are amazing tools, and we're not quite there when it comes to robotic arms yet in terms of all the stuff that we can do. It's very intricate movement. It's going to be very difficult to automate.
Interesting. And this is kind of my wrap-up question. What advice would you give a business looking to upgrade their warehouse automation over the next 3 to 5 years?
The honest truth and simplest answer is I would say involve an expert, right? Whether it's me or somebody like me, involve somebody who knows what they're doing and does this for a living because it's a lot to take on. Nobody can expect a business owner to say, I run my business, I'm an expert in my business, and now I'm going to go out and I'm going to become an expert on automation, material handling, forklifts, racking, integrating all that into one system. That's a lot. And I think a much easier way to do it is to find a few people that you trust, have them come up with a couple of ideas and solutions, and then see which ones you think make the most sense based on your business. Talk to them, find somebody you trust, and do business with them. At the end of the day, you're going to wind up buying the equipment from somewhere anyway. You might as well buy it from someone who's going to install it and service it throughout the life of it. Finding
vendors that you could trust. That's exactly what I was talking about. A tenant rep versus the landlord's broker. Not to say the landlord's brokers aren't trustworthy, but they're there to promote one particular building or maybe a few buildings. So I totally get that and understand that, where a tenant rep is a trusted advisor who's agnostic as to which solution is the best. They just want to find the best solution for the client. Very similar to what you're doing.
I'd love to think of Abel Womack as an automation company because we've been around for so long, right? And we have our roots as a forklift dealer. What can we do to
you've evolved way past that.
Way past that. Listen, it's part of like what we're doing right now is we want to get that message out there that we're way beyond just doing forklifts, and we are just doing some very, very high level projects for some very high level customers that look really cool. You guys are going to see the videos. You're going to see some clips during this. I'd love to be thought of as a automation solutions provider and an integrated systems provider instead of a forklift company only.
Right. Automation guru, we'll call it.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
I'd get a shirt or something, or a name tag that said automation guru.
Jonathan, the automation guru.
There you go.
Cool.
We got teams of people that do it. It's not just me. I'm the manager of the core sales group. We have automation guys. We have telematics guys. We have guys who only focus on vertical lift modules and mobile racking and
a whole team.
Yeah. We got a lot of divisions.
This is kind of wrapping it up. I thank you for your time and for explaining to the audience the ROI on automation. And I think you said so many poignant things, but one thing that's stuck out in my head is if you're not automating in the next 5 years, you may be out of business. I believe that that's true. With AI now and robotics, you're either a company that adopts that or you're going to be left in the dust. And that's the truth. So, well, Jonathan, thank you so much for spending the last, give or take, an hour with us. I found it very informative. And again, I appreciate you coming on the iOptimize Realty podcast, where we host experts like you who can educate our clients.
Ben, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the time. I look forward to talking to you in the future, and I love this experience.